It was a crisp Saturday morning in Charlotte, North Carolina. The sun had just begun to warm the quiet cul-de-sac of Ashwood Lane, where the latest luxury development was underway, a line of 5-bedroom, modern colonial-style homes meant for elite buyers, as the brochure proudly described. Tyrone and Celeste Mitchell pulled into the driveway of house number 8, the one they'd arranged to tour that morning. Tyrone, dressed in a sleek navy blazer and slacks, stepped out first and opened the door for Celeste, who wore a burnt orange pantsuit and a smile that didn't need approval to exist. They had arrived a few minutes early, intentional, professional, respectful. Inside the house, visible through the glass-paneled door, stood Mark Dunning, a local real estate agent with neatly parted blonde hair and a fitted vest embroidered with his firm's name. He sipped from a silver tumbler, scrolling through his phone. Mark glanced up, did a double-take when he saw who was approaching, and looked back down with what could only be described as practiced disinterest. He took another slow sip, made no move to open the door. Tyrone and Celeste exchanged a glance but remained poised. Tyrone knocked. Mark finally opened the door with a tight smile, more like a wince. "Can I help you?" "Yes," Celeste said calmly. "We're the Mitchells. We scheduled the 10 a.m. showing." Mark didn't step aside. "Right. Listen, this home's just come under serious review by another buyer. Not sure it makes sense to show it today. These types of homes move quickly." Tyrone raised an eyebrow. "Isn't that what a showing is for?" Mark laughed dryly. "Sure, but it's also about pre-qualification. We're trying to avoid wasting time, no offense. This is a $1.9 million property." Celeste's smile faded, but her gaze stayed steady. "None taken. We won't waste yours." They turned and walked back to their car, the dismissal burning in the space between their shoulders. But neither of them let it show. Tyrone opened the door for Celeste again, and as he stepped into the driver's seat, he reached into the glove compartment and pulled out a folded portfolio. It was stamped, Mitchell Plus Green Development Group, Site Acquisition Package, Ashwood Estates. Tyrone handed it to Celeste. She flipped to the page that showed the blueprint of the entire cul-de-sac, including the home they had just been turned away from. She laughed, softly but sharp. "He has no idea, does he?" "No," Tyrone said, starting the engine. "But he will." 3 days later, in a sleek glass office tower downtown, the mood couldn't have been more different. A dozen executives sat around a polished mahogany conference table in the boardroom of Stonefield Realty Group, the firm handling the Ashwood Lane development. Floor-to-ceiling windows looked out across Charlotte's skyline, but the tension in the room kept eyes fixed at table level. At the head sat Deborah Lynn, the regional director, sharp, respected, and not known for wasting time. She tapped her pen once, then looked toward the assistant near the door. "Bring them in." The door opened. In stepped Tyrone and Celeste. Mark Dunning, seated halfway down the table, straightened in his chair and froze. His face drained a shade paler the moment he recognized them. His mouth opened slightly, but no words came out. Celeste walked in first, professional and poised, followed by Tyrone, holding the same navy portfolio from the car. They offered polite nods around the room and took the 2 empty seats prepared for them at the far end, directly across from Mark. Deborah smiled. "Thank you both for joining us, and again, congratulations. We're thrilled to move forward with your firm as our joint development partner on the Ashwood Lane expansion." Murmurs of agreement circled the table. Celeste clasped her hands neatly in front of her. "We're excited as well. We see tremendous potential in the area and believe this can be more than just a luxury development, it can be a statement of vision and inclusivity." Tyrone slid the portfolio across the table. Phase 2 includes community green space, eco-efficient features, and 5 additional lots. We'd like to see those built by minority-led contractors wherever possible. Mark's eyes flickered to Deborah, who didn't return the look. She was busy flipping through the portfolio, nodding with growing enthusiasm. Then, finally, Mark spoke, forced, low. "I believe we may have met before." Tyrone turned his head toward him slowly. "Oh? Where was that?" Mark shifted uncomfortably. I think it was at a showing." Celeste smiled. "You mean the one where you refused to open the door?" A pin could have dropped in that room and shattered glass. Mark swallowed. "That wasn't. I didn't realize that we were the developers?" Tyrone finished. "No, Deborah looked up. Her voice was flat. We don't need to rehash it. What matters now is that the Mitchells are our strategic partners. Mark, you'll be supporting their team moving forward." The finality of her words closed the discussion. Mark gave the smallest nod, the kind you give when you've been benched and everyone knows why. Celeste turned back to Deborah. "Shall we begin?" "Yes," Deborah said. "Let's build something better." And so the meeting began, not with apologies, but with blueprints, strategy, and power seated where it belonged. By the end of the week, the real estate circles in Charlotte were buzzing. What started as quiet murmurs and hallway conversations quickly turned into full-on chatter at open houses, broker meetings, and corporate lunches. Everyone seemed to know some version of the story. A young black couple had been dismissed during a home showing, only to return days later as the developers behind the entire Ashwood Lane project. The narrative spread faster than truth could keep up with. Some whispered about poetic justice, others about professional embarrassment. But one name kept popping up again and again: Mark Dunning. In group chats among agents, memes began circulating. A photo of a locked door with the caption, "Better open it," could be the owner. Even rival firms couldn't resist gossiping. "Did you hear about the guy who shut out the developers? That's career suicide." Inside Stonefield Realty, Mark felt it. The once casual nods in the hallway had become polite silence. His colleagues didn't laugh at his jokes anymore. His assistant no longer lingered for updates. His emails took longer to get answered, if they got answered at all. Meanwhile, Tyrone and Celeste's names were being spoken with rising admiration. Real estate newsletters highlighted the bold investment strategy of Mitchell Plus Green Development Group. A LinkedIn post featuring their company's ribbon-cutting ceremony at Carter Green, their last completed community, went viral. But the Mitchells themselves? They remained silent. They didn't gloat. They didn't tweet. They didn't issue statements. Instead, they spent their time in design meetings, reviewing renderings, and meeting with local vendors. They toured neighborhoods, speaking with residents about their needs. They made time for a local charter school director who wanted to partner on youth construction apprenticeships. And quietly, without fanfare, they ensured the new sales office at Ashwood Lane featured a prominently displayed motto: "Respect everyone. Assume nothing. Build for all." When the site signage went up later that week, complete with their names and company logo, a few neighbors came to watch. One of them, an older black man who lived nearby, smiled and approached Tyrone as he oversaw the installation. "About time someone like you got behind those walls," the man said. "They've been gatekeeping this place for years." Tyrone shook his hand. "Not anymore." And with that, the foundation for more than just homes was laid, a foundation for trust, for dignity, and for a future no longer dictated by outdated perceptions. The golden morning sun rose over Ashwood Lane, casting a warm glow on freshly cleared lots and steel-framed outlines of what would soon be homes filled with new stories. This was the day the project would officially begin, the groundbreaking ceremony. Rows of folding chairs had been set up near the entrance of the property, now marked by a large white banner that read, "Future Site of the Ashwood Legacy, developed by Mitchell Plus Green." Tyrone adjusted his tie while watching contractors move equipment in the background. Celeste stood beside him, speaking with a local news anchor preparing to cover the event. Her poise was effortless, her words focused. She didn't talk about the discrimination they had faced. She spoke about housing innovation, community inclusion, and the economic opportunities they intended to bring with this project. The audience filled quickly: city council members, neighbors, local black business owners, real estate professionals, and families interested in the new homes. Among them, Mark Dunning stood quietly in the back, sunglasses on, trying to look invisible. He had not been invited. But he came anyway: curiosity, guilt, or pride, maybe all three. He stood with folded arms, watching the couple he once dismissed now command a room he couldn't even step into with credibility. Tyrone stepped up to the mic. He wasn't flashy, but he was precise. His voice rang out steady and calm. "We're not here to build walls," he began. "We're here to build bridges. Communities aren't made from bricks, they're made from dignity. Access. Respect." He paused, letting it sink in. For far too long, these spaces were kept behind velvet ropes, close to those who didn't look like the imagined buyer. But we're flipping that script. We're designing homes for the real world, diverse, dynamic, and fair. Celeste joined him at the podium. We've partnered with minority contractors, green designers, and local schools to ensure that every part of this community reflects progress, she said. And we're just getting started. They lifted ceremonial shovels with their company logo etched on the handles. Cameras clicked. Applause rose. The soil turned, and with it, so did an era. Behind the crowd, Mark lowered his head. He wasn't just watching the start of a construction project. He was watching the end of a system that once protected his assumptions, and the beginning of a future he no longer controlled. The couple he had dismissed as outsiders now stood firmly at the center. And they were building something bigger than homes. They were building change. Weeks passed, and Ashwood Lane became a living, evolving project. Trucks rolled in daily. Framing went up. Roofs took shape. But beyond the sawdust and scaffolding, something deeper was happening. The culture of the project, and of the community around it, was starting to shift. Tyrone and Celeste weren't just signing contracts and reviewing floor plans. They were reshaping the way real estate was done. They established a transparent buyer process that removed traditional barriers, no unnecessary credit gatekeeping, no biased assessments of qualified buyers. Each prospective homeowner was treated with respect and dignity. First-time Black and Latino families who had once been priced or profiled out of neighborhoods like this were now walking through model homes with real options. They introduced equity-first builder partnerships, prioritizing minority-owned firms and vendors that had long been overlooked for major suburban contracts. The result? Faster builds, stronger community trust, and a wave of skilled jobs returning to underserved neighborhoods. Inside real estate firms across the city, younger agents started rethinking how they interacted with clients. Several reached out to Mitchell Plus Green, asking for guidance, mentorship, and even employment. Tyrone hosted a workshop titled Human First Real Estate at a local university, which quickly sold out. He didn't lecture, he listened, told stories, and challenged assumptions with grace. Meanwhile, Celeste worked closely with the city's housing office to propose a pilot program allowing future developments to reserve a portion of lots for educators, healthcare workers, and veterans, ensuring diversity and economic balance in the community. But the biggest shift came unexpectedly. One day, as Tyrone walked into the on-site trailer for a progress meeting, he noticed a familiar figure waiting awkwardly by the coffee machine. It was Mark Dunning. He turned, face flushed, clearly uncomfortable. "I didn't come to ask for anything," he said quietly. "I just wanted to say. I was wrong. That day, I didn't see who you were. And it's no excuse, but I've realized how often I do that to people." Tyrone didn't blink. "It's not about seeing who I am," he said. "It's about not deciding who someone isn't before they get a chance." Mark nodded slowly. "Thank you for not returning the same energy." Tyrone gave a small shrug. "We don't build by tearing people down. We build by laying a better foundation." And with that, he walked into the meeting, where newer, hungrier minds waited to build something that reflected not the past, but the future. It had been nearly a year since Tyrone and Celeste first stood outside the home they weren't allowed to tour. Now, the same lot, once guarded by doubt, stood proudly at the center of a thriving, nearly complete development. Ashwood Lane had transformed from a sleepy cul-de-sac into a symbol of what was possible when vision met integrity. The homes were finished, the landscaping lush, and the sidewalks wide and welcoming. And on this bright Saturday morning, the Mitchells were hosting the first open house, not just for prospective buyers, but for the entire community. Balloon arches framed the welcome tent. A jazz trio played under a canopy. Food trucks lined the perimeter, serving everything from shrimp and grits to vegan soul bowls. The aroma alone was enough to pull in curious neighbors from surrounding blocks. Families of every background walked through model homes, marveling at thoughtful touches, reading nooks designed for children, ADA-accessible entrances, solar-ready rooftops, and framed artwork by local artists in every living room. Celeste moved gracefully from group to group, answering questions and making people feel at home even before they stepped inside one. Tyrone stood near the community board, where photos of the build process hung beside handwritten cards from local youth who had interned on site. But what struck most visitors wasn't just the design. It was the feeling. The unspoken realization that this place wasn't built to impress, it was built to include. Even former skeptics and competitors couldn't deny it. Real estate agents who had once dismissed Mitchell Plus Green were now lining up to take brochures and ask about partnerships. A local anchorwoman aired a live interview, calling the development a quiet revolution in Southern housing. Then, toward the end of the afternoon, a young couple approached. nervous, maybe even intimidated. The woman said softly, "We weren't sure we belonged here. But then we saw how your staff treated everyone, like they mattered." Celeste's eyes softened. "You do belong here. That's the whole point." The couple smiled, and walked toward the next home with hopeful eyes. As the sun began to set, casting golden light across the rooftops, Tyrone and Celeste stood together on the porch of the original house, the one they'd once been turned away from. Now, it was the welcome center. "I guess we opened more than a house today," Tyrone said quietly. Celeste nodded. "We opened a door that should have never been closed in the first place." And behind them, laughter, music, and the sounds of a community forming echoed down Ashwood Lane, a place no longer defined by exclusion, but by expansion. 5 years later, Ashwood Lane wasn't just a neighborhood, it was a blueprint. What the Mitchells started as a quiet act of defiance had grown into a statewide movement in real estate and community development. Mitchell Plus Green had expanded into 5 more cities, partnering with civic leaders, local nonprofits, and financial institutions to make inclusive housing more than just a talking point, it was a standard. But it all still came back to Ashwood Lane. The trees were taller now. The community garden was thriving. Kids rode their bikes freely down the same street that once tried to keep people like them out. The neighborhood book club met in rotating homes, and the local elementary school had adopted a STEM program sponsored by the Mitchells Foundation. Inside the Welcome Center, framed on the wall, hung 2 photos. One showed Tyrone and Celeste standing outside the unfinished home on the day they were turned away, stiff smiles, guarded eyes. The other showed them at the open house ribbon cutting, arms around each other, surrounded by families from all walks of life. Below the photos, a plaque read, "Built on grace. Rooted in justice. Designed for all." Ashwood Lane, a Mitchell Plus Green community. Mark Dunning had long since resigned from Stonefield Realty. After a sabbatical, he opened his own small firm, one committed to equitable service and fair housing. He never spoke publicly about what happened that day, but he did quietly donate to the Mitchells Scholarship Fund every year. When asked in an interview what they considered their proudest moment, Celeste didn't talk about profits or properties. She simply said, "Seeing a black child ride his bike down a street his parents helped build. That's legacy." And Tyrone added, "Our success was never about proving anyone wrong. It was about proving what's possible." They never sought revenge. They sought respect. And by staying rooted in purpose and truth, they turned a moment of prejudice into a movement of power. Ashwood Lane was no longer just a street on a map. It was a symbol of what can rise when doors are opened, and who can lead when the gatekeepers step aside.